Okay, so today at NBC is doing an interview with the jury foreperson from the Jennifer Crumbley case. Now, for those of you who don't know, Jennifer Crumbley is the mother of Ethan Crumbley, and she was charged with 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter because Ethan Crumbley took a gun into a school and killed 4 people. Here is the news report about her arrest.
At noon today, Oakland County Prosecutor Karen McDonald announced both James and Jennifer Crumbley were being charged with 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter for buying Ethan Crumbley the handgun. The parents and school were presented hours before the shooting with incredibly alarming, violent pictures on Ethan Crumbley's desk, along with the words, "Help me." The school allowed Crumbley to remain at school. Prosecutors say the parents did not tell the school they had just bought their son a semi-automatic handgun.
I am angry. I'm angry as a mother. I'm angry as the prosecutor. I'm angry as a person that lives in this county.
Also at noon today, Judge Julie Nicholson approved the charges against the parents. An Oakland County Sheriff's investigator told the judge that they were headed to arrest the parents and have them back in court by 4 today.
Okay, so Jennifer Crumbley, as you just heard, was charged with involuntary manslaughter. So generally, involuntary manslaughter encompasses 4 things. Number 1, you have an unintentional killing. The person didn't mean to kill anyone. That's what you have here. They're saying the mother didn't intend these people to die. The second thing you have to show is that the defendant created this unjustifiable risk. Here, the state is showing that the mother created this risk by arming her son and all this other stuff. You'll hear about some of the evidence in a minute. Also, the state's going to have to show that the defendant was aware that this was a risk and disregarded that risk. Classic example is something like the Alec Baldwin situation, where Alec Baldwin had a firearm and pointed a firearm at someone, and he didn't know it was loaded, but when he pulled the trigger, someone died. Now, he didn't intend for that to happen, but the state is saying that it's an unjustifiable risk for you to point a gun at someone, not check it, and then when you pull the trigger, it goes off and kills them. You can't say, I just didn't know, no. That was an unjustifiable risk. Same thing with drinking and driving. If you drink and you drive and you kill someone, the state's going to say, even though you didn't intend to kill someone, you created an unjustifiable risk and you disregarded that risk and someone died. Now, the state essentially in this case had to prove that the mother was the one, or the parents were the ones, to create this situation that allowed their son to carry out this school shooting and in turn involuntary manslaughter. So, for instance, the state showed that the son was mentally ill and the parents knew that he was mentally ill. But what do you do to someone who's mentally ill? They bought him a gun and then showed him how to use that gun by taking him to a range and shooting it. So the state is saying that was irresponsible of a parent to do. But even if you do buy him a gun, they didn't secure the firearm, so you didn't have unauthorized use. They, had it willy-nilly and he was able to use it. They didn't tell the school that they bought him a gun when he started having these drawings of, shooting things in school. They also show text messages where the mother was texting her secret lover that this could have all been prevented and that the school should have sent him home and not returned him to class. So it showed that how the mother knew that her son was dangerous, knew that there was this risk, armed him, trained him, and then trying to wipe her hands and say, hey, I didn't really know what was really going on. That's what the state is saying. Now, the defense is saying that, hey, it's not illegal for them to train their son to use weapons. It's not illegal for them to take him to a range. She knew her son was troubled, but he liked guns, and she was trying to, this was kind of their little therapy. She didn't believe that he would, commit any type of murder or school shooting or anything like that. And that she's not responsible because she wasn't aware that this was this risk, and everything that the state is putting forward isn't an unjustifiable risk. It's just something that happened that was beyond her control. So that's the argument in a nutshell. Jury comes back and says guilty on all 4 counts. She's now looking at 15 years. So let's look at the jury foreman and see what the jury was thinking about when they convicted this woman.
What was the evidence that swayed you in the end? You said it wasn't an easy decision. This wasn't a slam dunk.
Not easy at all. So speaking for myself, I know that each individual juror had their own opinion. This did this for one person, this convinced the other. For me, I just feel like Jennifer didn't separate her son from the gun enough to save those lives that day.
You felt she was the last person known to have had custody of the gun.
Yes.
And then somehow it ends up in his hands.
And I think the responsibility of securing the weapon then falls on her.
What about those text messages or journal entries or things that the jurors saw where it indicated that Ethan had asked for help and that his parents hadn't given him that help? Was that persuasive to you?
To me personally, it wasn't as impactful as the evidence of her having the gun. But I know for my fellow jurors that the notebook played a huge part.
Tell me about her testimony.
Now, this is interesting because, again, you see here, they're at the range. She's showing him how to work the gun, how to load the gun, all this other crazy stuff. And she knows that he has these mental health issues. And on top of that, I think this juror is right in the sense of, yeah, the parents, her as a parent, her responsibility is to keep that weapon secure. And they didn't. They obviously didn't keep that weapon secure. That's the reason why he was able to get it. And her having this knowledge of his, his wanting to harm people in this way, that puts some responsibility on her. And it's interesting how, it wasn't the text messages that convinced this juror. It's the fact of, good gun ownership, right? All my firearms have trigger locks on them. Like I even have extra trigger locks. Do I have one here? Yeah, I have trigger locks on all my weapons. So my kids, even if they would, it's unoperable because they don't know the codes, like none of that stuff. So they wouldn't be able to use anything at my house. And I think that's what this woman is saying. And that's what most state laws say. Most state law says if you have children in the home and you have firearms, you have to secure them in a way where even if your child was to get access to that thing, they wouldn't be able to use it. It'd be inoperable in that sense. So I understand where this juror is coming from.
It's Jennifer Crumbley took the stand in her own defense. She testified. What did you make of her on the witness stand?
At the time, I tried to take her as she gave herself. But once we went into deliberation, it became clear that she wasn't a super reliable witness in this case.
Do you think she helped herself on the stand or hurt herself? Would it have been better, in other words, if she hadn't testified at all?
We'll never know.
Yeah.
That's an interesting question because, but it sounds like she was alluding to that it probably would have been better if she didn't testify because if you don't believe what she's saying, then that just hurts her credibility because don't forget the ultimate credibility is she's saying, I'm not guilty. So it's like, I don't believe anything you're saying here. So it seems like it may have been a better choice for her maybe not to testify. But again, I know a lot of my friends, like on Civil and a lot of people who've been watching this, Danny and Direct, they're all saying that, the defense attorney did a horrible job. So that may be all part and parcel where you don't have any choice at that point in time, right?
Talked about her testimony. There was a point where she was asked, would you have done anything differently? And she said she wouldn't have. How did that strike you and the other jurors?
It was repeated a lot in the deliberation room. I think that it was very upsetting to hear. I think that there are many small things that could have been done to prevent this.
And I think that may have been, that may be crucial too. Because if you're saying I would have done everything exactly the same, then that puts it in Juror's mind. We don't want somebody to feel that way, right? If we let her go and something like this happens again, she's going to say, I'm going to do everything the same. So this is kind of that message, like you can't do that, right? Don't do that because that will get you a guilty verdict. So it's like, these little bitty things that pop up in trials. You don't know how explosive they are to the jury, but now you see.
You went back into the jury room. You're the jury foreperson.
I am.
Which is a big responsibility. And I should just mention again, there is no manual for jurors. Nobody tells jurors how to deliberate. Mm-mm. So how did you handle it? And how was the jury immediately in agreement or how did it play out?
So I took it more as a job of facilitation. I wanted to make sure that each and every juror, to the best of my ability, was heard and understood and made their point and we heard their piece. And so that was the role that I took on as the foreperson. It was not immediately unanimous, and it was my responsibility to hear the concerns of those on either side and construct an argument either way.
I think that's interesting because it shows that they weren't unanimous at the beginning. I would like to know how many were for or against her, that type of thing, but it doesn't seem like she wants to get into that. But so a couple of people had to be convinced that this was guilt. So it's always fascinating to show where they start from to where they end. And I'm assuming there were more guilties than innocent because I'm not innocent, they're not guilty. Because generally it's easier to turn those not guilties to guilties than go the opposite way.
Do you feel that the jurors wish they could have heard from Ethan Crumbley himself?
I'm not sure how much that would have helped or hurt.
All right, Alex, thank you so much for your civil service. Being a juror is not easy, and this was a very difficult case. Thank you so much.
Well, after listening to her, what she just said, I'm thinking the key piece that sent these jurors to the whole guilty verdict was the fact that the mom said, I would have done everything. I wouldn't have changed anything I'd done. I would have done it all the same again. And I think that was enough to say, this is what we need to stop her from doing this again. And, you know, the father is on trial next. He's going to go on trial next. But what did you think about this juror's interview? I don't really think she gave us a lot, but I do think it does let us into the window that I think at the end of the day, this jury just kind of came to the point where could this mother, anything this mother had done in between that time frame had stopped her son? And seeing her at the range, like we saw before, pull it back. But when you see her at the range with her son, showing him how to use the weapon and all that stuff, knowing his mental issues, knowing that she said she wouldn't have done anything differently again. Even, for instance, she could have even said, hey, I would have made sure the gun was secure, right? I would have made sure the gun had a lock on it so he wouldn't have been able to use the gun. I would have been more careful with it. But she didn't say that. She said, there's nothing I would have changed. You're guilty. I would have said I would have secured the gun, make sure he wouldn't have been had access to the gun. But she didn't say that. She said what she said, and the jury said no. That is your liability. But let me know how you feel in the comment section, because this case has got a lot of media attention now. People are saying, oh, all parents are going to be. I think if you're a parent doing stuff like this and, giving them the gun and not securing your weapons and all that stuff, there's some liability. I think the parents are definitely civilly liable. I think they should, the parents of the 4 kids who were killed or anybody who's injured should definitely sue the bazoois off of these parents. But I also think that this is not as clear cut as I think a lot of people want to make it seem. But I do think this sets a precedent that, hey, if you are just so reckless with the way you're handling firearms and children and all that stuff, there is a responsibility that you may have criminally if you don't at least take just simple steps to make sure things like this don't happen. But let me know how you feel in the comments section. My name is Nate the Lawyer, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.